In last week's e-newsletter, I wrote about Roosevelt's potential to open up on Sunday mornings for worship. And I mentioned some possible dates, maybe even towards the end of this month. Just want to give an update on where we're at in terms of thinking through that. And the answer is that basically we're going to keep doing what we've been doing, which is to say at least through the month of May, probably going at least into mid-June, we will continue to just live stream the Sunday morning worship service. There's a couple of things that factored into that thinking that I want to list out for you. Number one, the results of the survey that we did. Thank you for those of you who filled out the survey, sent it to us. If you haven't done it yet, please do that. If you're a part of Roosevelt and you received that survey. But those results were somewhat mixed in some ways. 32% of you wanted us to keep doing what we're doing. 30% of you wanted us to keep doing the multiple services. 22% said just do multiple services, sort of just over the course of a Sunday. 22% said just do one service in person. 15% put other. In looking through all this, you can see there's a range of responses, but the highest response was 32% for us, higher by a little bit, for us to keep doing what we're doing. And I think the responses, especially given for that, really leaned hard on let's just be cautious and careful in what we're doing. Regardless, given the fact that, well, it's 30% said let's keep doing the live stream, 30% say let's meet in person with the multiple services, and others variations of that. It shows that we're sort of still thinking through this as a community, and we want to take some more time to keep talking to you all and getting a sense of what's best, when's the best time for us to do an in-person worship service. Another factor is just the feedback from our medical people within our church. That I'll just say that does weigh a little bit more heavy in terms of us thinking through what we do, and almost to a person they said, hey, it's probably too soon to open by, let's say, this Sunday or even later on in May. Let's give it a little bit more time. And so that's a factor that's weighed into us just waiting a little bit longer. Another factor is just our desire to follow the different guidelines that have been given out. And those guidelines aren't just what the state offers to us, it's also what the federal government has given to us and also what the CDC has given to us. And in my looking at it, I've wanted to see sort of alignment in all those three areas. And there isn't quite alignment. Certainly from the guidelines given by the federal government and the CDC, we haven't yet met what they call a phase one for us then to be able to be in person. So given that, it sort of suggested that maybe we should just wait a little bit more to begin to see some of the things that our government, our federal government and the CDC has listed as things to look for before moving into a phase one type of in-person meeting. And the other thing is just, and something I've mentioned before, we don't feel a strong desire to be the first out the gate, that we want time to observe what's going on, see what's happening, see what others are doing, get the sort of best sense of how best to do this. As I've often said, we have chosen to be overly cautious in this, but we'd rather say overly gracious. And we're glad to own that we're going to be overly gracious, which means just delaying and not feeling a sense that we need to rush and start meeting as soon as possible. So again, for now, we will continue to just do the live stream, at least as Sunday morning is concerned. Now, in saying all this, let me just say our desire is to be gracious, overly gracious to the vulnerable among us. But as time has gone on, we realize we also have a desire to care for those who are hurting in the midst of this, for community. We want to be gracious to the vulnerable. We want to be caring for the spiritually hungry, for whom in-person community is vital. And it's vital for all of us. It's hard to go just this long already without having that. And so one of the things has made me, getting the different results and other things, what's made me sort of think of this a little bit differently is to think not so much just about, okay, how soon can we get back together on Sunday morning, but to say, well, maybe there's other things we can do that allow us to have some measure of in-person community that is at lower risk or at least meets some further range of guidelines that have been given to us that we can at least begin to do as we look forward to hopefully, by this year at some point being able to be in person again, if all the things line up the way they should. And so one of the things we're exploring is doing some type of small group in-person experience at the Roosevelt Church building that would involve communion and prayer. It'd be for a limited time, let's say like 20 minutes or less. I mean, that's an early idea, so give me some time to work it out, and hopefully by, well, for sure, I'm sure by next week, we'll be able to sort of give you an idea of what that will look like, and I'd like to see us start doing that in June. Let me just say this. I am so thankful for the Roosevelt family. You all have been very gracious to one another in the answers that we got from the surveys. I mean, some of you feel very strongly about what you feel about, and yet a number of you, pretty much all of you, have said, not just looking out for yourself, but also looking out for what's best for our church. That's been the motivating desire, and I genuinely appreciate it. That's made my job as a leader way easier to have you all be that way. Pastor Isaiah in a staff meeting shared this verse that he felt the Lord put in his heart, and I thought this is an entirely appropriate verse. 1 Corinthians 12:23. Now those parts of the body that we think less honorable, we bestowed a greater honor, and our unpresentable parts are treated with greater modesty. Just a desire to always think the parts of the body that are struggling or whatever else, however they're struggling, let's keep that in mind as we have these discussions. Some other verses that came to mind for me were Romans 14, verse 13. Therefore, let us not pass judgment on one another any longer, but rather decide not to put a stumbling block or hindrance in the way of a brother. And Romans, same chapter, verse 19. So then let us pursue what makes for peace and for mutual upbuilding. A desire not to make one another stumble, but to lean in hard into what builds up our church, what leads to peace and mutual upbuilding, what leads to unity. So thank you, Roosevelt, for believing those verses, for leaning into it. So let's continue to love God. Let's continue to love one another. Let's keep praying. Let's keep trusting. Let's get leaning hard into what God has already promised to do for His church, which is to establish His church, and the gates of hell will not stand against us. So again, let's keep trusting. Let's keep praying. Let's keep believing. Let's keep doing those things together.